Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the monthly licensing webinar. My name is Ian Jard. I'm one of the Microsoft licensing consultants for Ultima. And today we'll be running through, just some of the Microsoft licensing updates and changes that we've kind of seen over the last few months, in actual fact, kind of dating back to April, in actual fact. What I wanted to do was really cover off what some of the changes have been, what some of the name changes have been, and what really that means and what products are encompassed and some of the new price points or what are the pricing as well. So I'll run through some of the new suites, the new names, how it's all been put together while recapping, and then we'll kind of have a full comparison of all the cloud suites available from Microsoft. There, as always, will be chance for you to ask questions as we go. So please do. We're making a note of them. I'll either cover them off as we go or kind of address them at the end. As always, these webinars are going to hopefully stoke some questions for yourself and your own organization. Obviously, everyone's different, so everyone's unique challenges or drivers. There'll be the right plan for you. So obviously very aware of Microsoft's licensing structure. It is very kind of complicated, very convoluted. But you could argue that there's always going to be the exact right SKU for you, the exact right product, exactly right way of licensing things. Obviously, I kind of appreciate that does mean that there is basically a huge amount of sprawl, a large amount of uncertainty as well. We've actually just finished the Microsoft financial year, so that finished at the end of June. So the releases that Microsoft have been doing have perhaps been lost a little bit or a bit misunderstood. So we will just run through those changes today. It's always worth just clarifying a base position, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is licensing for the commercial enterprise. So a lot of the things I'll be talking about really are for those organizations kind of above 300 users, those who have enterprise agreements, enterprise subscription agreements, server and cloud enrollments, MPSA agreements, CSP agreements, and open agreements are going to be covered as well. But let's just recap quickly what we're going to be talking about in regards to the suites, because I'm going to be referring to Microsoft 365 and Office 365. And let's start off with Microsoft 365 E3, because that's in the enterprise a lot where some of these changes have happened. So when I'm talking about Microsoft 365 E3, I'm basically talking about Office 365 E3 with the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite E3, and also the Windows 10 Enterprise E3 license as well. Now, as you can see, they're all called E3. And finally, there I've also put the hybrid use rights that you get with the Microsoft 365 package, which basically includes being able to have that Office license installed locally on the device, for the offline working, for Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and everything. And then you get the server productivity rights as well. So for Exchange, for SharePoint, formerly for Skype for Business as well, you've actually got the on-premise servers, so you can actually truly have that hybrid environment. The M365 also includes things like SCCM, Intune on-premise and your Windows Server account, your rights management services as well. But effectively, it's your online licenses. Office 365 is your productivity, so your email, Teams, OneDrive, Yammer, that Office license. The Mobility Suite E3, these are your controls, things such as Intune, Active Directory Premium Plan 1. So that's where you will find multi-factor authentication and your conditional access, and then Information Protection Plan 1 as well. With regards to the Windows desktop, effectively the Windows 10 Enterprise E3 license is an upgrade license from that Windows Pro license you get with when you buy the machine, that OEM license. And really what you're buying is direct access, BitLocker, that kind of MDOP, kind of virtual desktop type functionality. Also, volume activation rights as well, so you don't have to kind of go around to every individual device. So that's Microsoft 365 E3, and then kind of on top of the next level up from Microsoft 365 E3 is E5. So again, similar, same breakdown with, Office, Enterprise Mobility Suite, and the Windows 10 Enterprise Desktop. But now we've got E5 level of functionality. So in the Office 365 part, it's the audio conferencing and the phone system, full telephony. You would still need the call plans, but also the Power BI Pro license, some of the advanced e-discovery suites, customer lockbox, and some of the advanced security. You've got some of that within Office 365. Within the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, this is where you have MCAS. You also have the AD Premium Plan 2, Information Protection Plan 2 for some of the classification of that data, just that next level of compliance and security. And on the desktop side, it is Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection. So Microsoft very much, especially coming towards the end of their financial year, there's a huge push on selling as much E5 as possible. They want to take all customers who are currently at E3 level and push them to E5. Many organizations, when they're looking at these, what we've got listed in front of us, the functionality of E5, it doesn't stack up, because great, you're interested in Power BI Pro, but that's a large investment just for one small element. So to aid customers, rather than having to buy the full suite or just buying these individual components, what Microsoft have been doing with these new suites and name changes is trying to make this E5 position more palatable, more valuable, have a slightly better, phased approach in regards to stepping individuals up, individuals or organizations. So rather than going to full E5, there's these steps in between. So if you imagine you've got Microsoft 365 E5 on the left there, and then as part of that functionality, okay, the boxes aren't, it should probably be more than half, but I've got some, so there's the E3 as part of the E5. But then what you can do is, well, actually, I'm only interested in that Power BI Pro, or I'm only interested in phone system or audio conferencing, whatever it is you could buy. For example, one approach would be to buy those individual suites until eventually the individual suites, stacking them up becomes more expensive than just buying E5. But what Microsoft have done is they've released a couple of new kind of mini E5 suites, which is Microsoft 365 E5 Security and Microsoft 365 E5 Compliance. This was kind of at the start of the year. And what these do is actually break down the security features of that E5 suite. So when we look back previously, we saw that Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection was in on the Windows desktop side. You had Cloud App Security on the Enterprise Mobility side, and then you had some advanced compliance on the Office 365 side. So you might want the E5 level of security or compliance, but that would mean, well, we can't buy them as components, we have to buy the full suite. No, what the security and compliance suites do is they hive the E5 level of functionality and basically bundle them up together. So when we start looking at the pricing, we can start realizing where the savings are possible. If, for example, the pricing we used here roughly is level A enterprise agreement pricing. I've rounded up a little bit for simplicity. But if we imagine that the Microsoft 365 E3 is £30 and then the full E5 is 50, rather than kind of per user per month, rather than going from 30 straight to 50, you might realize, well, actually you're only interested in the E5 security suite or the compliance suite, in which point security suite is only an additional £9, or the compliance suite is £6.50. So you can, as you can see, you can actually add a couple of components or maybe a suite, still will be better value than buying that full E5 investment for all of your users, or for a subset, or for a certain profile of user. Similarly, you might decide to just stack up those individual components. Phone system is £5, Power BI Pro is £6. Suddenly just those two components, you're suddenly looking at the low £40 for E3 plus them. So then you can maybe start justifying or start looking at some of the other products within E5 which would justify that extra push. So that's very much Microsoft's strategic play with the pricing and with the way that they're breaking down these suites. But even then, even when they released these mini E5 suites, the Microsoft 365 E5 Security and Microsoft 365 E5 Compliance, even then they weren't seeing organizations really invest or take it up. So what they've done is now they've taken the Microsoft 365 E5 Compliance and also now break that down into 3 components itself. So as you can see, it really does start getting pretty convoluted, and every organization is going to have their own use case and scenario, and working out your correct licensing structure is going to be key to that. But if we take that M365 compliance from the previous slide that we know is an individual suite with £6.50, that in itself is now possible to buy that in 3 different flavors. So you could buy M365 compliance just inside a risk management, which would only be £385. Again, similarly to the other step ups and justification, as soon as you need 2 of these components, kind of based, £4, £3 each, suddenly once you need to buy a couple, it does become more cost effective to buy the larger compliance suite. For example, I have been speaking to legal organizations who have been looking to move to Office 365 or Microsoft 365 or the Microsoft Cloud Suite. The full E5 didn't stack up. What they were very interested in is that advanced e-discovery. So the e-discovery and audit feature of the compliance suite was very good value, and rather than having to buy their full £15, Microsoft 365 E5, we have qualified that down to actually the elements is the advanced e-discovery, which is part of M365 compliance. So just pay that extra £6.50, but actually don't even do that. Look, let's actually look at the e-discovery and audit piece at just £385. But actually, there does become another question regarding, well, can I just buy these individual suites? If I didn't want to buy, do I have to have the E3 layer underneath? What are my prerequisites? And that's, that is a really important element to consider as well, because sometimes you might just look at a license like the e-discovery license there for £3.85 and think, well, that's fantastic, I'll buy that. But that's kind of on reliance that you do have some of that E3 licensing level underneath. So on this slide here, this is taken from the Microsoft product terms from this month, which is readily available, or I can kind of send it through. You'll see that, and also this is kind of referring to E5 and also A5, which is the academic suite. So if you were an academic organization, you wouldn't be buying Microsoft 365 E5, you'd be buying Microsoft 365 A5. But the point here is that on the left-hand side of these new suites, the E5 Security Suite, the E5 Compliance Suite, and then from that E5 Compliance Suite, we can see that broken down into its 3 component parts of e-discovery, insider risk management, and information protection. You will see that on the right-hand side, there is some base licensing required. And yeah, absolutely, it is that Microsoft 365 E3 level of licensing, which means Office 365, EMS, and that Windows 10. So that does require those licensing prerequisites. You can't just go and buy Microsoft 365 e-discovery and audit if you don't have that base licensing in place. But it's really crucial to understand what your prerequisites are and therefore what you would need to step up to, because these are really step ups. Even though they don't say step ups, they are really effectively step ups. We will kind of come back to an overall recap of what I've just run through there and a wider comparison piece, and I'll kind of run through from start to finish. But there is also something else which isn't something we always cover, but it is really relevant. There's some of the other name changes in regards to the small and medium business that Microsoft are doing. And when I refer to the SMB offerings, I really classify that out because these are the ones with a strict user restriction, right? You can't get more, won't work with more than 300 users. But so for that reason, really for the for enterprise organizations, the whole business offerings aren't really relevant. But because of the name changes, it's really kind of important to cover them off. So this happened at the end of April this year. and they've renamed their small and medium business offerings, which were always under the Office 365 business kind of package, and they've changed that from Office 365 business to Microsoft 365 business. So for example, Business Essentials becomes Business Basic. Office 365 Business Premium becomes Microsoft 365 Business Standard, whereas Microsoft 365 Business now becomes Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So pretty convoluted. And also they've adopted this Microsoft 365 acronym, this brand, which in the enterprise space, when you see Microsoft 365, we've just covered off, it covers Office 365, it covers the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and it covers the Windows 10 license as well. That's in the enterprise space. The reason I'm bringing this up, because in the SMB space, with these suites, these business suites, which have the 300 user limit, they've had a name change from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. But in this space, when you hear this suite, it doesn't include the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and it does not necessarily include that Windows 10 desktop as well. So in the small and medium business area, when you hear Microsoft 365, it's not referring to what it means in the enterprise space, which is all of those three core products. It's actually just referring to what is in effect Office 365, although now it's called Microsoft 365. So it's really easy to get completely confused and tongue-tied. I think it's the kindest way of putting it. A realistic way would be some people in America were fearing for their jobs, and so they decided to need to change a lot of things to justify that. I think Microsoft would say it's a clarification of I don't know what, but there is the right suite out there for you as an organization. Let's just have a quick recap of what really I was talking about there. So Microsoft 365 Business Basic, Microsoft 365 Business Standard, and Microsoft 365 Business Premium are the new suites, the new named suites for the small and medium business up to 300 users. As you can see, these are the products that they include. Pretty basic cloud services for the top one. Again, when you were saying Exchange, we're really talking about that's one reduced for Business Basic is kind of the 2 gig inbox. When you get up to Business Premium, it is the larger inbox. But for example, OneDrive generally is only going to take 1 terabyte of data. In the enterprise space, it's more like 1.5. So this kind of in the basic world, this kind of reduced version of Outlook and of Teams and elements like that. So with Business Premium, look, there are some elements of the enterprise space, because when you get to Microsoft 365 Business Premium, okay, yeah, you do get actually Windows Defender and some of the enterprise mobility things like Intune within that. But as a general thing, and if you're buying in the enterprise space, the whole business packages aren't going to be that relevant, or shouldn't be that relevant for you. The final change in that space is something called Microsoft 365 apps, which you might hear about. You might hear, well, can we qualify for apps? This is where you're basically just buying something like Office Pro Plus, which is previously Office 365 Pro Plus, just, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Microsoft have changed the name for small and medium businesses to Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise or apps for business. The other naming change I wanted to cover off was again from April, and this is for the first line worker. Now, the first line worker, obviously they were previously called the kiosk worker, the K plans. So traditionally aimed at people who would spend only, a fraction, 20% of their day in front of a PC, delivery drivers, shop staff, store workers or manufacturer workers, people like that, delivery drivers perhaps. And you previously basically had Office 365 F1, and then you had Microsoft 365 F1 as well. You've now got a couple of new entry points and some naming changes. So you've now got a new entry point of Microsoft 365 F1, which does include pretty basic use rights. Office web apps really doesn't include the email. It's just being able to manage their devices with Mobility Suite, and they can communicate, so they would have access to Teams, so elements of SharePoint, and obviously Yammer and that communications piece within that. Once you're stepping up from F1 to F3, now actually Microsoft 365 F3 in the new world is actually exactly the same as Microsoft 365 F1 in the old world. Again, at 2 gig of storage in OneDrive and in your inbox. So basically Microsoft 365 F1 has now become Microsoft 365 F3. And then there's a new suite called Microsoft 365 F1. You could argue, why don't they just rename it to something completely different? But they decided not to do that. And then we have a new, now the existing Office 365 F1 has now become Office 365 F3. And again, in this world, because it's for the enterprise, when we say Office 365, it is just referring to that productivity, to the productivity servers, so Exchange and Teams, Yammer. It doesn't include the Mobility Suite, EMS, and it doesn't include Windows. So you've got these kind of first line worker plans as well. So now suddenly, and these slides will be made available, and this is a slide, a particular chart that I'm sharing an awful lot of. These are all of those suites compared side by side against each other. Actually, having said that, not quite all of them, but I'll come on to that in a second. But what I really wanted to do was also just take us through a recap of where we were and what the new licensing changes are, and how that affects the overall picture when it comes to the naming conventions and choosing which is the right suite for you. So kind of flowing from left to right, in the red here is the Office 365 suites. So again, in the enterprise space, we're talking about Office 365. We're talking about not including the Mobility Suite or that desktop. It is just your productivity servers, Exchange emails. You've got F3, then it goes from F3 to E1, E3, and then E5. Again, when we're kind of talking about F3, again, let's remember we're effectively talking about that plan 1 level of inbox, so that 2 gig inbox, because it's for those real, first line workers. Once you get to E1 with Office 365, big difference is going to be that full version of Exchange. So you get that 50 gig inbox, and you also start getting the full Teams plans included as well. Once you get to E3 level, then you will have that Office Pro Plus level of licensing, and then finally E5, which we covered off, which in the Office 365 space, it's Power BI Pro, and it's telephony, it's e-discovery. Then we start getting into the blue from left to right. We start getting into the blue color, Microsoft 365. But starting on the left, we've got Microsoft 365 Business Basic, and we run through the apps of business just as individual components, and then onto Business Standard, and then Business Premium. So all of these, even though they're called Microsoft 365, actually Business Premium does include the desktop. These first 4 don't include all the elements of the desktop license, and don't include the tools to control the users as well, such as Intune, such as Active Directory Premium, although they do contain elements of them. So again, just to stress, please do check your own licensing requirements. And then once we start moving towards the right with Microsoft 365, you see the entry is that F1 license with very much kind of read-only access, 2 gig inbox, first line worker. Then we've got the introduction of F3, which does include some of the desktop licenses and Intune, and does include a slightly more functionality within Teams, so that these users can communicate with each other, still very much with that 2 gig low first line worker inbox and OneDrive storage. And then for me, from F3, we move on to E3, and then finally onto that higher level of E5. So as you can see underneath this chart, what it really does is a full matrix, and it just breaks it all out. And you would say, well, actually, we're missing some elements from this Microsoft 365, because actually in between the E3 and the E5 layer, we've now actually got to consider, well, we've got Microsoft 365 E5, these mini suites, we've got security and we've got compliance. And actually, if we can't justify that full compliance, even that Microsoft 365 compliance suite can be broken down into 3 component parts, whether that's insider, risk management, whether that's e-discovery, or whether that's information protection. So there's a lot of complexity, a lot of similarity with these name changes. But really, as Microsoft push these changes, it's because all of the licensing is moving towards this per user, per month type approach. I mentioned Microsoft's end of financial year, and really this has put into, you know, context the fact is that they're really pushing the CSP, a significant option for organizations. Don't get me wrong, the enterprise agreement isn't going anywhere, and for many enterprise organizations it's the right answer. I think most prevalently those users, those organizations with users between, you know, like level A level, perhaps 500 users to 1,000 users, are really seeing a lot of value from the price point and the flexibility. Certainly with lockdown, some of the challenges, being able to adjust the users on a month-by-month basis. I'm aware I'm talking about CSP now because just because it's becoming more and more relevant. When we're talking about Microsoft 365 for business and the small and medium business, that's what CSP was initially designed for, but now absolutely it's being used by the enterprise, and you can buy all of the enterprise licenses on there. The price point is really attractive. Being able to increase and decrease users, really attractive. Look, yeah, you've got to be a cloud organization. The hybrid use rights aren't as good as an enterprise agreement. You can't have different concessions. If you have certain amendments perhaps within your EA, it's going to be better for you. But the CSP is becoming far more relevant every single day, really, especially coming through the end of the financial year. So that's really what Microsoft are doing when we're looking at the suites and how that kind of aligns to some of these new programs. And certainly in Microsoft's new financial year, you're going to see more and more incentives around the CSP. Ultima ourselves, we've made a significant investment in our CSP. So this is, I mean, CSP, right, is where you're buying it from the partner as opposed to buying it directly from Microsoft as you know, with an EA. But with CSP, you get, you know, with Ultima, for example, you get the full 24/7 by 365 support with some first, second, and third line levels within that. You get the full advisory service, but what you also have is a portal, so you can actually see your price list on there. You can monitor users, increase and decrease them as required. Yeah, a little bit more. Maybe you want to only address that once every quarter, once every 6 months. But the CSP allows that flexibility, and it's quite a significant shift. Don't get me wrong. You know, don't get me wrong. There is still going to be enterprise agreements, MPSA agreements. Every organization is different. We're actually seeing, you know, large organizations with EAs just having CSPs on the side. I mean, some organizations through mergers are even buying some of these business apps because they need to maintain a business during merger for 6 months, 7 months, and then they're going to wrap them up and merge them into the wider organization. And so there's a lot of flexibility that is available now. So you know, even though you might not think some of these suites are relevant, you never know what's around the corner. So that pretty much brings the webinar to an end, and I did want to ask if there are any questions. Excellent, there are some questions, so I will see if I can just open up this suite. So the first question, can you license a subset of users M365 with M365 E5 security compliance, or do you have to license all your users? So actually you can license a subset of your users. The EA would always be you have to have, you know, everyone on the same thing, but absolutely no, that's not the case. You can have as many different profiles of users as you have. Like I say, we need to bear in mind what those prerequisites are, there's always going to be a way to exploit the existing licensing that you have in regards to step-ups or add-ons or from SA discounts. So you do not have to have everyone in your same, in your organization using the same suite. No. What are the small and medium business options that include a Windows 10 license? Microsoft 365 Business Premium is the one that includes the Windows 10 license. What SKUs for these products? Oh, okay, yes. So I didn't include the SKUs for these products. I'm not sure who the asker was there. So if you do send me an email or you contact your account team, we can send you through these slides we made available. We can send you through the SKUs. One of the reasons I don't do that is because even when you're looking at something like Microsoft 365 E3, how you buy that, there's like a 10 or so different options. You might have from SA if you've been buying it for 3 years already, you've been on premise for 3 years already. Might be a step up if you've already got Exchange Online Plan 2 or Office 365 or EMS over here. So we don't generally include the SKUs because even with each individual product, there might be a unique one that's right for your organization. But having said that, if you do send through a request, we can, more than happily cover that off. Are you able to share these slides with us so I can share this with my team, please? Yes, of course. Actually, I'll send you through these slides. Actually, what you probably want is some of these comparison documents as well. So if I actually want this full comparison document here that we've got on the screen, then do please let me know and we can send them through. I hope, and that's all the questions. There is another slide after this. Now I've gone into drawing mode. I don't seem to be able to click on to the next slide, but that only said, thank you very much for attending. Like I say, you can, please do reach out to your Ultima account team if you want to know more about the suites, your unique scenario about CSP or how you buy this stuff. But other than that, thank you very much for your time.